He came from the frozen steppes of Mongolia, a boy with no tribe, no army, no allies. He would become the most feared conqueror the world had ever seen. His name struck terror from China to Europe, Genghis Khan. But behind the victories, behind the empire, lies a shadow few dare to explore. This is not the tale of a hero. This is the untold darkness of Genghis Khan. He was born as Temujin in 1162, under the wide, endless sky of the Mongolian plains. His world was brutal from the very beginning. His father, a minor tribal leader, was poisoned when Temujin was still a child. Overnight his family became outcasts. They were abandoned by their own clan, left to starve. His mother, Holun, dug for roots and bones just to feed her children. They ate rats. They ate grass. Sometimes they ate nothing. That kind of hunger doesn't just shape a man. It forges something else, something harder than steel. By the time he was a teenager, Temujin had already killed his own half-brother to assert dominance. Mercy was not a lesson he had been taught. Survival meant eliminating anything that threatened you, even your own blood. He was eventually captured by a rival tribe and enslaved. They bound him in a wooden collar, parading him like an animal. He escaped, not by begging, not by diplomacy, but through sheer force of will, and a few unexpected allies who would follow him for the rest of their lives. Temujin understood something vital. Loyalty was stronger than blood. He built bonds with warriors across the steppe, not through nobility or tradition, but through shared hardship and unbreakable trust. By his early 20s he was uniting the fractured Mongol tribes under a single vision, his. In 1206 he was crowned Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. But this was not the rise of a king, it was the unleashing of a storm. The empire he would build was not stitched by treaties. It was carved by fire. Genghis Khan didn't just conquer, he erased. Entire cities vanished. Populations were slaughtered by the tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds. Those who resisted him were met with calculated terror. Survivors would be left alive, only enough to spread the story of what happened to those who defied him. He weaponized fear itself. Take the city of Nishapur in present-day Iran. After a Mongol commander was killed during the siege, Genghis ordered revenge. The result? Over 100,000 people were massacred. The streets ran with blood. Every man, woman, and child was cut down. Historians say the heads were piled into pyramids outside the city gates as a warning to others. In the conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan faced betrayal. A caravan of Mongol traders was executed. His ambassadors were mutilated. That was enough. What followed was one of the most ruthless campaigns in medieval history. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, ancient jewels of Islamic civilization, were besieged and destroyed. Libraries were burned. Scholars and poets were slain, the rivers clogged with bodies, and yet, it was all meticulously organized. Genghis wasn't a mindless butcher, he was a master tactician. His armies moved with supernatural speed. He used spy networks, psychological warfare, and fake retreats to lure enemies into traps. He studied his foes, exploited their weaknesses, and struck with terrifying precision. No fortress was safe, no wall was high enough. But perhaps the darkest chapter wasn't what Genghis did to his enemies. It was what he demanded of the world after. He believed in total obedience, not just on the battlefield but in thought. He enforced Yasa, his strict legal code, with iron discipline. Theft, betrayal, even disobedience to orders could mean instant death. His warriors were not allowed to loot without permission. If they did, they were executed, on the spot. Mercy was weakness. Discipline was everything. He destroyed aristocracies and nobility, burning records and erasing lineages. He tore down social hierarchies and replaced them with a new one, his own. Those who served him were elevated, no matter their bloodline. Those who resisted, vanished. Still, Genghis was not merely a conqueror, he was a paradox. While he drowned cities in fire, he also established one of the most stable and advanced empires of the time. Under his rule, trade flourished across the Silk Road. He protected merchants and opened diplomatic routes from Asia to Europe. He allowed religious freedom, welcoming Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and even shamans into his court. To his allies he was just, to his enemies he was death incarnate. One tale captures this duality. In the city of Bukhara, after the Mongols stormed its gates, Genghis stood in the Friday mosque addressing the terrified citizens. "I am the punishment of God," he said. "If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Was it cruelty, or did Genghis Khan see himself as divine retribution, an avenger sent to punish corruption and arrogance? The question lingers, because behind every burning city there was a reason. Behind every massacre, a message. In his mind these were not atrocities, they were lessons. He was building an empire not on diplomacy, but on memory, etched into flesh and stone. Yet the deeper we go into Genghis Khan's reign, the more complex he becomes. Was he a monster, a genius, a prophet of death, or a necessary force that broke the decaying world to rebuild it in fire? One thing is certain, no one who crossed him survived unchanged. He didn't just build an empire, he reshaped human history. And in part 2, we'll follow the terrifying legacy Genghis Khan left behind, how his blood runs through 16 million men alive today, how his descendants ruled over the largest contiguous empire in world history, and how his darkness still shadows the world he helped forge. Because Genghis Khan wasn't just a man, he was a storm that never stopped moving. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, the world didn't breathe a sigh of relief, it held its breath. Because what he left behind wasn't peace. It was a machine of conquest that would outlive him, one that would stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna. The Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous empire in human history. But it wasn't built on dreams, it was built on fear, fire, and the code of one man. Genghis had carefully laid the foundation for a dynasty unlike any before it. His sons, trained from birth in warfare, loyalty, and strategy, inherited not only his lands, but his mindset, and they carried out his vision with terrifying precision. The destruction didn't stop with his death. In fact, it intensified. His grandson Batu Khan led the Golden Horde into Eastern Europe. Cities like Kiev, once thriving centers of trade and culture, were reduced to ashes. The Mongols moved like shadows, fast, brutal, unrelenting. In 1241 they defeated a coalition of European knights at the Battle of Legnica. Heads of fallen nobles were paraded on spears. Castles that had stood for centuries collapsed in days. But the darkness wasn't just in their swords, it was in their legacy. Historians estimate that up to 40 million people may have died as a direct result of the Mongol conquests. In China, Persia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe, entire populations were wiped out. And yet, records show Genghis Khan's empire also enforced one of the most secure trade routes in history. The Silk Road, once riddled with danger, flourished under Mongol rule. Bandits were executed, merchants traveled freely, ideas and inventions passed between East and West. But always behind the progress was the threat of annihilation. Even Genghis's own family wasn't safe from his expectations. One of his most loyal generals, Yebe, once disobeyed an order. Genghis forgave him but warned him, disobedience even from a friend cannot become habit. The message was clear. Loyalty was not a choice, it was survival. His sons, Yoshi Chagatai Ogedei Tolui, vied for influence. Rumors swirled that Yoshi, his eldest, may not have been Genghis's biological son. The doubts haunted their relationship until the end. Yoshi died before his father, under mysterious circumstances. Coincidence or consequence? And then there was Hulagu Khan, Genghis's grandson, who led the Mongol siege of Baghdad in 1258. The city was a crown jewel of Islamic civilization, a center of art, science, and knowledge. The Mongols didn't just sack it, they annihilated it. The House of Wisdom, a library holding centuries of human knowledge, was destroyed. Legend says the Tigris River ran black with ink from the books, and red with the blood of scholars. The terror continued under Kublai Khan, another grandson, who ruled over China and founded the Yuan dynasty. While he embraced some Chinese traditions, he kept Mongol dominance intact. Native Chinese officials were sidelined, resistance was crushed. Though Kublai appeared more diplomatic, the machinery of control, rooted in Genghis's vision, remained unchanged. But here's the paradox, with every city burned, the Mongols also built. They connected east and west in ways no one had before. They introduced paper money, international passports, courier systems, and even religious tolerance. A Buddhist, a Muslim, and a Christian could serve side by side in the Mongol court, as long as they obeyed the Khan. Still, obedience had a price. Mongol tax collectors operated with absolute authority. Farmers who couldn't pay were executed, villages that missed quotas were erased, loyalty brought reward, but defiance brought extinction. And yet, through all this chaos, Genghis Khan's personal life remained surprisingly humble. He wore simple clothes, he ate with his men, he slept in the same tent, he forbade torture, prohibited the kidnapping of women, and outlawed the enslavement of fellow Mongols. He lived by a strict code and expected others to do the same. But what he couldn't control was what came after. As the empire expanded, it fractured. Infighting between his descendants created civil wars. The empire split into 4 major khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. Each would eventually fall. But Genghis Khan's bloodline did not. Today, genetic studies estimate that 1 in 200 men alive, roughly 16 million people, carry the Y chromosome of Genghis Khan. His legacy is literally woven into human DNA. Today, genetic studies estimate that 1 in 200 men alive, roughly 16 million people, carry the Y chromosome of Genghis Khan. His legacy is literally woven into human DNA. And his name? Still debated, still feared, still revered. In Mongolia, he is a national hero. His face appears on currency. Statues of him ride high over hills and airports. Children are taught of his wisdom, his bravery, his ability to unify a divided people. But in other parts of the world, his memory is darker. In Iran, Iraq, China, and Eastern Europe, he is remembered as a butcher, a destroyer, a ghost that came from nowhere and left only ashes. So what was he really? A warlord? A visionary? A necessary evil in a world already broken? Genghis Khan was not like other conquerors. He didn't just seize land, he rewrote the rules of civilization. He believed the world should be ruled by merit, not bloodline, by law, not tradition, and if that meant burning the old world to the ground, so be it. His darkness was not madness, it was method. To him, every scream, every fire, every conquest had a purpose. And that purpose still echoes today, in the borders of nations, in the ruins of ancient cities, in the bloodlines of millions. He wasn't just a man of his time, he was the storm that ended it. If you were shocked, fascinated, or just blown away by the true story of Genghis Khan, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more epic, untold legends from history's darkest corners.